So full disclosure, I haven't played The Last of Us. I don't have a PlayStation, so I have to suffer with the rest of the plebs waiting for the game to release on Steam later this year. But I've been aware of The Last of Us since its initial rise to popularity a few years ago, so I do know the general storyline and have a vague idea of what to expect from it. I'm a big fan of the zombie apocalypse genre. Everything from games and books to comics, movies, and TV shows. And I'm also someone fascinated by fungi, so I was really excited when I found out that The Last of Us was being adapted into a TV show. I know video game adaptations are, shall we be generous and say hit or miss? But since the game was specifically lauded for its storytelling, I was fairly confident that the adaptation would be solid, and so far I haven't been disappointed. But this video is not a review of The Last of Us. Instead, I want to talk about the third episode of the series, Long, Long Time. And specifically, I want to talk about why filler episodes are good, actually. Well, okay. I guess if I was being really honest, I would say filler episodes can be good. But that's not nearly as strong of a video title, is it? Anyways, I think a well-done filler does a lot of things. First, it allows the characters to breathe. And I think you actually get some of your best character moments in a good filler episode. Second, it gives the audience time to digest the events of the previous episode. And third, it creates an opportunity to add texture to the world of the story and make it feel more lived in. I guess for starters, we should define what a filler episode is. TVTropes.org defines filler episodes as entries in a generally continuous serial that are unrelated to the main plot, don't significantly alter the relationship between the characters, and generally serve only to take up space. I don't think that's the most charitable definition of a filler episode. For example, I don't think that Long, Long Time exists only to take up space. But I do think it meets the other criteria of a filler episode with respect to the main storyline. It doesn't substantially advance the relationship between Joel and Ellie, and it doesn't significantly change the plot beyond getting them the truck. If you skip it and go straight to episode 4, it's likely that the only question you'll be asking is, oh hey, where did they get the truck? Despite that, this was my favorite of the first 3 episodes of the series. And when I thought about it more, I realized there are actually several standout episodes in other shows that ultimately do amount to filler, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. There are some really great filler episodes out there. For example, Fish Out of Water in Bojack Horseman, Tales of Ba Sing Se in Avatar the Last Airbender, all of Season 2 of The Walking Dead. Okay, I actually liked Season 2, but, we kid because we love. So this is the part where I give you a brief summary of the episode, and that means spoilers. So if you haven't seen episodes 1 through 3 of The Last of Us, go watch them and then come back. There are also some minor spoilers for the first game. We start the episode with Ellie and Joel in the woods, processing Tessa's death from the previous episode. Joel is handling it with his usual sullenness and stoicism.
Look, I've been thinking about...
I don't want your sorries.
I wasn't gonna say I'm sorry.
And Ellie lets him know she refuses to be blamed for it.
I was gonna say that I've been thinking about what happened. Nobody made you or Tess take me. Nobody made you go along with this plan. You needed a truck battery or whatever, and you made a choice. So don't blame me for something that isn't my fault.
This does seem to remind Joel that Ellie's just a kid, so he lightens up a bit. They stop by an abandoned store where Joel has some stuff stashed. Ellie tries to talk Joel into giving her a gun again, and Joel refuses. Ellie also scavenges some tampons and kills a trapped infected in the basement after briefly examining it. Their plan is to do as Tess suggested and get Ellie to Bill and Frank, Tess and Joel's radio friends. Ellie and Joel continue down the road and they pass a crashed plane. Ellie marvels at Joel's luck to have gone up in a plane.
Dude, you got to go up in the sky.
And asks how the infection happened, and Joel gives us a theory about tainted food.
I mean, No one's infected with cordyceps. Everybody's fine, eating in restaurants and flying in planes, and then all at once? How did it even start?
No one knows for sure, but best guess, cordyceps mutated. Some of it got into the food supply, probably a basic ingredient like flour or sugar. There were certain brands of food that were sold everywhere, all across the country, across the world. Bread, cereal, pancake mix.
Eventually, they get to a mass grave, and Joel reveals that in the early days of the outbreak, people were rounded up, allegedly to be sent to a quarantine zone. But if there wasn't room, they were killed en masse.
These people weren't sick.
No, probably not.
I'd kill them. Why not just leave them be?
Dead people can't be infected.
The camera pans over the grave, and we see the remnants of 2 pieces of fabric next to a pair of bodies. One has a green floral print, and the other is light blue and has rainbows on it. This is where we leave Joel and Ellie for a while, gazing solemnly at the remains. In a really nice transition, we cut to the green flower print fabric, no longer sun-faded and torn. It's a dress, worn by a woman holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket with rainbows on it. It's 2003, the start of the outbreak. The woman is in a crowd of people who are being loaded onto trucks by the military and driven out of their small town under mandatory evacuation order. Our view switches to a scruffy man watching the events unfold on security monitors. He's hidden away in a secret basement. He watches them leave and emerges to find the town deserted. This is our introduction to Bill, played by Nick Offerman. I know a lot of people were surprised to see Nick Offerman cast in this role. After all, he's mostly known as a comedy actor for his role as Ron Swanson in Parks and Rec. But if you've seen Alex Garland's criminally underrated series, Devs, in which Nick Offerman plays a shady tech CEO with a secret, you know the kind of acting chops and dramatic range that this man has.
Don't worry. You're gonna figure it out.
Okay, this may or may not also kind of be an excuse to plug Devs, because I think it's a great show and nobody saw it. So go watch Devs if you're bored waiting between episodes of The Last of Us and need more dramatic Nick Offerman. He's great. Bill is a survivalist, and we watch as he busies himself with setting up a solitary little life. He raids the hardware store, stockpiles a bunch of gasoline, sets up a power source, and loots the liquor store. He sets up traps for wayward infected and other defenses around his house, and then basically just hangs out for the next 4 years. It's at this point that we're introduced to Frank, played by Murray Bartlett. Bill finds a man has fallen into one of his traps. Despite meeting Bill at gunpoint, Frank manages to talk his way into a hot shower and a good meal.
Boston is that way. You can make it by nightfall.
I'm really hungry.
So go.
All right, first, my name's Frank.
Oh, yeah? Here's the thing, Frank. If I feed you, then every bum you talk to about it is going to show up here looking for a free lunch. And this is not an Arby's.
Well, Arby's didn't have free lunch, it was a restaurant.
They share a meal of rabbit with a fine
Beaujolais.
which Frank notes and appreciates.
A man who knows to pair rabbit with a Beaujolais.
I know I don't seem like the type.
No, you do.
After the meal, Frank sits down at a piano in Bill's living room and badly tries to play Long, Long Time by Linda Ronstadt.
Love will abide, take things in stride.
Bill puts a stop to it and plays the song a bit more competently.
I think I'm gonna love you for a long, long time.
Nick Offerman actually does play the piano in real life. Frank asks who this girl Bill is singing about is, and Bill admits there is no girl, and Frank goes in for the kiss. We then get an incredibly tender love scene between the two, where Frank guides Bill, who hasn't slept with a man before, through their first encounter. But he warns them that if they're intimate, he'll stick around for a few more days. Man is not paying for lunch and sexual favors, no sir. 3 years later. Bill and Frank are having an argument over beautifying the houses and stores around their home.
Our home isn't just our house, it's everything around us.
Give me a fucking break.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I live in this world. You live in a psycho bunker where 9/11 was an inside job.
Bill doesn't see the point, but Frank wants to show love for their home by caring for it. Bill relents, but is perturbed when he finds out that Frank has made some friends on the radio and plans to invite them for a visit.
But we are gonna have friends.
Excuse me?
The friends are, of course, Joel and Tess. Tess and Frank are fast friends. Joel's a bit more reserved, but kind of bonds with Bill over their shared cautious nature. They understand each other. We see Frank and Tess coming up with the radio codes that were mentioned in the first episode.
Oh, and I had this idea that we should use codes for the radio in case anyone's listening. Like, I was thinking, like, the decades, like, 80s, trouble.
Joel offers to trade with Bill to help them fortify their defenses.
Sooner or later, there'll be raiders. They'll beat that fence and your tripwires. They'll come at night, quiet and armed.
3 more years later. Frank surprises Bill with strawberries that he grew after trading Tess a little one of Bill's guns in exchange for some seeds. We get another incredibly sweet and tender moment between the two where they just enjoy the simple delight of strawberries on a sunny afternoon.
I was never afraid before you showed up.
Later, we're shown a raider attack in which Bill's fence does most of the fighting, but Bill is also out there taking shots at would-be intruders. Bill is injured. Frank helps him inside, and for a moment it seems like Bill might not make it. We see the men on the porch and one of them is in a wheelchair. At first we think it's Bill, but as we zoom in we see that it's actually Frank. 10 years later. It's 2023, close to present day. Frank appears to have some degenerative disease like MS. His mobility becomes limited, but Bill helps him throughout the day with tenderness and devotion. At the end of the day, Bill helps Frank into bed and gives him a gentle kiss on the cheek. The next morning, Frank tells Bill that he wants to end his life, and wants this day to be his last.
But I've had more good days with you than with anyone else. Just give me one more good day.
Bill has a hard time with it, but agrees. Frank picks their outfits, they marry each other, and Bill serves dinner, rabbit with
Beaujolais.
a nice little bookend mirroring their first meal together and their last. After they finish dinner, Bill pours them each a glass of wine and mixes crushed up pills into Frank's. Frank drinks his in one gulp. And Bill does the same. Frank realizes that Bill has also put pills in the bottle and dosed himself too.
This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old. I'm satisfied. And you were my purpose.
Frank doesn't support it, but there's nothing to be done, so he appreciates the romance of the gesture.
But from an objective point of view, it's incredibly romantic.
Bill walks Frank's wheelchair to bed, and they shut the door behind them. We cut to what appears to be a few days or weeks later, when Joel and Ellie approach Bill and Frank's home. Joel enters a code into the gate, but the home is clearly abandoned with the remains of their dinner molding on the table and the plants that Bill and Frank used to care for dead and desiccated by the door. Inside the house, Ellie discovers a letter Bill wrote that explains where he and Frank, who politely left the window open so the house wouldn't smell, are. He leaves all his weapons and equipment to Joel and tells him to use it to protect Tess. It's an important character moment for Joel where he realizes that he failed to protect Tess just like he failed to protect his daughter. Along with the letter, Bill left them the key to the truck and the ingredients to put a battery together for it. Joel assembles and begins charging the battery.
They have hot water! I'm taking a shower. And then you're showering. Seriously.
Ellie takes a shower and we see where she gets her iconic shirt from in the game. Ellie secrets away a gun after Joel once again refused to let her have one despite Bill's large collection of weapons.
Dude.
No.
There's a wall of them.
The two pile into the truck and set off. Ellie finds a cassette of Linda Ronstadt in the car and they cruise off into the sunset with Long, Long Time playing. The camera cuts to a shot of the view out Frank and Bill's bedroom window. And I'm not crying, you're crying? I cry every time I watch it. It's such a wonderful love story, and I'm not even mad that it buries my gaze, because we got to see their beautiful lives together, and that they went out together on their own terms. It's a story with so many sweet moments between these men, and we really get to see the kind of beautiful life people can still carve out together, even under the worst circumstances. It never felt salacious, and I found myself so invested in these two characters as they grew old together that it was almost jarring to return to the main story. I wasn't surprised when praise for this episode was absolutely everywhere, because it hits so many different notes so perfectly and expands beautifully on an otherwise minor character in the game. I also wasn't surprised when the complaints began to roll in. There were more than a few, but I will be sure to give the main complaints I saw the time that they deserve. One of the more disappointing complaints I've seen was that this episode was too woke. I'm not going to treat this argument very seriously because it's pretty much never coming from a place of good faith. It's basically just blatant homophobia. Diversity is realistic because the world is diverse. Plus, the source material features several LGBTQ characters. Bill is gay in the game. We just don't get to witness his life with Frank. It's not like this is totally contrived from nothing. The second complaint I saw was that there aren't enough zombies. Listen, I get it. It's a zombie show. The special effects makeup on the infected are incredibly cool, and you want to see more of it. I do too. That said, there's plenty of time for zombies in the remaining episodes. We did get to see one of Bill's traps get one.
Keep coming. Oh! It doesn't get old.
And we also got to have a nice up-close look at the zombie that Ellie inspects and kills at the start of the episode. So it's not like there were no infected in this episode. It gets boring if you're always focused on the same threat every episode. And Long Long Time did have a pretty extended fight scene with the Raiders, so it's not like the episode was devoid of violence if that's what audiences crave. By far, the most common complaint I saw was that the episode doesn't move the story along, people don't care about Bill and Frank, they don't understand why we took a detour, they just want to get on with the main story with Joel and Ellie, and they feel like this episode was wasted time. And as I said in the intro, to an extent, it is true that this episode doesn't really advance the plot in a meaningful way. We spend most of the episode with Bill and Frank, so obviously we aren't spending it with Joel and Ellie as they trudge to Bill and Frank's house. The episode does still do a bit to advance the main story. Joel is slowly warming to Ellie, and we see how losing Tess affected him. And of course, they get the truck, which keeps this from turning into the extended edition of Fellowship of the Ring, which I love, but can't deny features a whole lot of walking. It turns what otherwise would have been a short pit stop into an opportunity for an extended break in the main story. Sometimes it feels like people are in such a rush to get to the end of the story that they kind of lose patience for anything that slows the pace. And I can definitely respect and appreciate a show with really tight writing and pacing where every single scene advances the plot in a meaningful way. But with extremely tight writing, we're sometimes robbed of a chance to really just absorb the story, the setting, the characters. An episode like Long, Long Time gives us a chance to really explore the world beyond our main two characters, and I think the overall story is better for it. So let's talk about what filler episodes, and this episode in particular, do really well. A good filler episode can do a lot of things, but I think one of the biggest benefits is that it gives the audience a chance to slow down for a moment between major story beats. For example, in Avatar the Last Airbender, there are several filler episodes, one of the best of which is Tales of Ba Sing Se. It's a mini anthology of a few short stories that basically take us through the day of several characters in Ba Sing Se. It doesn't progress the story meaningfully, it doesn't really change anything, but it gives us some wonderful character moments. A lot of the time, filler episodes are strategically placed between big events in the narrative. They provide both the characters and the audience a bit of breathing room to process before the story moves on to the next event. In the case of Tales of Ba Sing Se, it comes after the culmination of a big storyline where the characters lost Appa, their sky bison, and have been trying to get to Ba Sing Se for weeks on foot. The episode gives us a chance to learn more about the city and the Earth Kingdom, while we process the ordeal that the characters went through to get there. The stories include Katara and Toph putting some bullies in their place, Sokka getting into a haiku rap battle with a poetry class,
Chittering monkey. In the spring he climbs treetops and thinks himself tall.
Ooh. You think you're so smart with your fancy little words? This is not so hard.
Ooh.
And the normally uptight Zuko going on a date. In another story, we see Aang, who is still grieving the loss of Appa, help a man rehabilitate a defunct zoo by using his bending to create a new home for the animals. It's pure fluff, but some much-needed levity after watching Aang suffer without Appa for several episodes. In the final story, we see Momo the lemur, also missing Appa, and seeing him in the shapes of his environment, like clouds and trees. While looking for Appa, Momo gets captured by a butcher shop and uses his opposable thumbs to help liberate himself and some other animals. His new friends help lead him to Appa's footprint. The episode does not reunite Appa with Aang, but it does set up the eventual arc where we will see what happened to Appa, and he will finally be reunited with Aang several episodes later. The standout of the bunch, though, is the tale of Iroh, who goes about his day generally being kind to people and doing what he can to help strangers he runs into, including a man who's fallen on hard times that Iroh befriends while the man is trying to rob him.
What are you doing?
I'm mugging you!
With that stance? With a poor stance, you are unbalanced and you can be easily knocked over. With a solid stance, you are a much more serious threat. But to tell you the truth, you do not look like the criminal type.
I know. I'm just confused.
Iroh also sings a sweet melody to calm an upset child.
Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile tiny shells drifting in the foam.
Finally, he makes his way to a peaceful tree on the top of a hill, and we see him set up a small shrine to honor his deceased son's birthday. And then he sings the song again.
If only I could have helped you. Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile tiny shells drifting in the foam. Little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy, comes marching home.
It's here that for the first time we see the usually joyful and serene Iroh cry. It doesn't advance the plot in any way, but it's an episode people often refer to as one of their favorites in the series, and it had some of the most deeply touching character moments as well. In a story like The Last of Us, in which there's a lot of violence and a constant sense of urgency in the fight for survival, Bill and Frank's story is a mostly calm reprieve for us to stop and consider the events of the first 2 episodes, because a lot happened. In the first 2 episodes, we're introduced to Joel and his daughter Sarah. We watch the chaos of the early pandemic unfold, we see Sarah die, and then move on to Joel living in the QZ 20 years later. We're introduced to Tess and Ellie and Ferda. And the Fireflies. We learn that Joel has a smuggling operation. He and Tess are seeking a battery and a truck to get to Wyoming to find Joel's brother Tommy. The guy with the battery then tried to sell it to several people, and when Joel and Tess go to hunt him down, they meet Marlene, who foists Ellie upon them and insists that they take her to State House where the Fireflies will pick her up and take her west, and will give them a truck. Joel kills a guard on the way out after Ellie stabs him. Joel and Tess find out she's been bit and panic because they think she's infected. The bite's actually 3 weeks old and mostly healed. Ellie reveals that she is not infected, she's immune, and the Fireflies want her to help make a vaccine. Tess believes her and they pick their way through the city. We learn that the cordyceps also have mycelium underground that allows the infected to communicate and can draw them out to a particular source. We learn that a lot of cities were bombed in attempts to contain the outbreak. Joel, Ellie, and Tess fight a pair of clickers in an abandoned museum. They make it to the State House and find that the Fireflies are all dead and infected. More infected start heading their way after they put one down. Tess reveals she's bitten and sacrifices herself. We find out she had feelings for Joel, and Joel was too shut down to be able to act on them. And Tess wants him to take Ellie to Bill and Frank. Weird kiss with one of the infected is the way she goes out. I left a lot of stuff out, obviously, but basically a lot happens, and we're not really given a lot of time to process it in those first 2 episodes because we're so focused on the task at hand. A filler episode gives you that nice break from the action of the main story and lets character deaths or major story beats feel like they have more impact. Joel and Ellie have time to grieve for Tess because they aren't on the run in this moment. We have time to just let the characters breathe in their section at the beginning and end of the episode. And then we get to enjoy a detour from the main story into who exactly this Bill and Frank we've heard so much about are. Because of the limited nature of a filler episode or arc in a show, writers can be at their best because they know that they have a limited time to tell the story. Since it usually isn't essential, the efficiency tends to focus more on creating a vivid emotional impression very quickly, with generally lower stakes than the main narrative. For example, in the Tales of Ba Sing Se, each of the stories was only around 5 minutes long. But because of the constraints, they were very efficient with the storytelling and very direct with the emotional goals of each one. Each story was extraneous to the general plot about saving the world, but they had a clear goal for how they wanted to make you feel and used visual shorthand when possible to communicate and elicit those feelings. It can also make writers get creative, like the well-known underwater episode Fish Out of Water from Bojack Horseman. The episode has almost no dialogue and has Bojack traveling to an undersea city to promote his new movie. He finds out he can't speak underwater, and as a result garbles his attempts to communicate with people and patch up a relationship with the former director of the movie, who was fired because of him. At the end of the episode, it's revealed there was a button on the helmet and he could have spoken the whole time. The episode mostly relies on the gimmick of miscommunication as a result of the setting and using primarily visual storytelling to communicate everything, likely in an attempt to save money on the principal cast for that episode. In The Last of Us, the writers do an amazing job of introducing Bill and Frank and making us care about them in under 40 minutes of screen time. They looked at the narrative from the game and saw an opportunity to expand on a side character and change his story to create a more satisfying arc for him and his partner, who's already dead where the video game picks up. In just one short episode, we get to see Bill grow from a prepper, whose only purpose in life is survival, to someone who realizes the joy of living. Letting Frank in profoundly expands his life and perspective.
Because there are no friends to be had.
Oh, I've actually been talking to a nice woman on the radio.
You what?
And it expands further when Frank brings Joel and Tess into their lives. The choice of showing us Bill's lonely life before Frank and framing it alongside exposition about the start of the outbreak helps us see how precious the happiness, laughter, and love Frank brings into Bill's life really is. Frank literally teaches Bill to live, laugh, love. And that helps us understand Bill's choice not to outlive Frank at the end of the episode. So let's talk about how filler episodes create opportunities for world building without necessitating exposition dumps. Could Joel have just told Ellie who Bill and Frank are? I guess, but it's way less interesting than showing us. Instead, we get to see another point of view of the early outbreak outside of Joel's. And we see all the work that Bill and Frank put into their home. Another thing that's great about slice of life filler episodes is that they can make the world feel more lived in. For example, one of my favorite Star Trek filler episodes is Data's Day. Star Trek is technically episodic, but there is kind of a continuity to it, so I am going to count it as serialized. Partially just because I want to talk about Data's Day. And I do think this episode is definitely filler in terms of being a low-budget episode to save money for higher-budget episodes at other points in the season. In this episode, Data, an android, is writing a letter to a cybernetics expert who has taken an interest in him.
Shooting, Commander? No. Would you care to sit down? When one of my friends is distraught, I have learned that the thoughtful thing to do is to attempt to make him feel more comfortable. May I offer you some refreshment, Chief?
No, thank you, sir.
Or a more comfortable chair to sit upon?
No, sir. Thank you, sir.
There's no big conflict or strange discovery in this episode. It's just Data going about his day, which also happens to be the wedding day of two of his friends, the Transporter Chief O'Brien and Keiko, a botanist. In Data's Day, there is technically a plot involving a secret Romulan disguised as a Vulcan ambassador, but that plot is honestly given less screen time than just Data tap dancing and waltzing and buying wedding gifts.
Are you here to find a wedding gift?
Yes.
I would appreciate your help in selecting an appropriate item.
Of course. I have attended human weddings before.
So it's kind of relegated to a B-plot, and what would normally be a filler or an introductory storyline really does take over most of the episode, and I think that's for the better. I don't think it always needs to be high-stakes dramas. Also, the image of Data dancing with that enormous, terrifying grin on his face. 10 out of 10. We love it every time. The story mostly revolves around Data preparing for his role in the wedding party, and Keiko briefly getting cold feet. But what it does do is further create the sense that life on the Enterprise keeps going behind the scenes between the episodes that we're watching. Normally, an episode of Star Trek features an encounter with aliens or stellar phenomena that create a problem for them to solve or a mystery to figure out. But having an occasional episode like this, where things are slower paced and the stakes feel lower, gives us the impression that there's more to life on the Enterprise than one problem after another. The various filler episodes in Avatar the Last Airbender, including Tales of Ba Sing Se or the Emperor Island episodes, do something similar. By telling these side stories, the writers add additional texture to the world and the cultures and characters within it. Long Time accomplishes this by showing us an entire life that Joel and Tess are on the fringes of. In Frank and Bill's story, they're not main characters. And so we get to see the whole life they led together through their eyes. It reminds us of the complexity of the world beyond just Joel and Ellie and their mission. The lives and deaths of people just getting by, including tender moments and petty arguments. It's a beautiful love story, and aside from the Raider battle towards the middle, there's not a ton of tension. The focus is really on the moments between Bill and Frank, like the simple joy and pleasure of a strawberry. And it tells us a lot about this world and what becomes special to the people in it. Bill and Frank manage to create a beautiful life for themselves, and it's a privilege that we get to see it. Another little tidbit of world building we get from this episode is Joel telling Ellie about the outbreak beginning in the food supply, specifically in something basic like flour. He then references pancake mix as an example, which adds new significance to the lack of birthday pancakes for Joel in the first episode.
Where's the pancake mix?
What was that? Yeah, it was. Sorry.
I was gonna make you birthday pancakes. I swear.
You know, I don't really like pancakes.
I know you don't like them. It's for my benefit.
And to the raisin cookies Miss Adler made, which if they'd been chocolate chip, likely would have turned Sarah into an infected along with Miss Adler's elderly mother. I know the main reason we watch serialized shows is to watch the story unfold and to see what happens to the main characters. But I hope we can also get to a place where people appreciate the chance to slow down and explore other parts of the story, even if it doesn't service the main objective. Maybe this is just because I'm the kind of person who spends most of their time in any open world video game just dicking around. But I really like the opportunity to learn more about the world of a story through other means than just focusing on the main plot. I also think it's a problem to evaluate art based solely on its efficiency. I understand the desire to get to the end as quickly as possible, but sometimes you just have to learn to enjoy the detours along the way. In the case of a TV show, the purpose is to tell us a story and entertain us in the process. How creators vary in going about that purpose is what gives us such a diverse array of different content to enjoy. Sure, there are some bad filler episodes out there, but this episode of The Last of Us is not among them. Despite the many attempts at review bombing, I think it's going to be known as a favorite episode in the series for a long, long time. Okay, I've been on YouTube before, but I kind of fell out of it for a while and my channel died, so I really wanted a fresh start with this new channel. And here we are! This is my first video essay on this channel, so please let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. If you liked what I had to say, or hey, just enjoy hate watching me, please subscribe. Thanks everyone. See you next time. Oh yeah, it's fine. We'll just watch this zombie apocalypse show. It's not like it's gonna break my heart or anything.